Well, we are so excited to be joined by Valerie Accetta. Valerie has a BA from Otterbein University and an MFA from Virginian Commonwealth University. She has some wonderful acting credits. She was in the first national tour of the State Fair, lots of great directing, and is currently the head of musical theater and the associate professor at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. I don't know why I said the associate professor, like you're the only
The only one.
head of musical theater at Alabama, Birmingham, which is located shockingly in Birmingham, Alabama. It's of about 12 to 14 BFA MTs. They offer that BFA and MT as well as a BA theater, BA dance, BFA acting, etc. We'll talk about some different degrees. Valerie, how are you doing today? Welcome on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to chat with you and to talk more about UAB.
I'm so excited to do it, and yes, and I think we will say UAB a little bit more colloquial now that we've said it, just to avoid the mouthful. But before we dive too deep into UAB, talk to me about. I read that brief bio of yourself, but talk to me about what is the previously on of what we need to know about Valerie. Like, what do we need to know in terms of you as a human being before we get into the school of your journey to the school?
Oh, I love that. I am originally from Columbus, Ohio. That was home for me. I grew up there. I moved away and went to college. I started at the University of Miami in Florida. And as you mentioned, I did do the first national tour of State Fair, which I booked my freshman year of college. So I'm
Mm, mm,
actually a
mm.
college dropout. Who knew that was going to
College
happen? I
graduate
love
to
school.
drop out with a master's degree. That's how you do it. That's your
Yeah. No, I did go back eventually, but before going back to finish my degree, I moved to New York. I was an equity
yep.
actress and did that whole scene for several years, and then went back to Otterbein, and they were really great to me. Of course, that's also in Columbus, so that was hometown
Yep.
for me, and I knew the folks there, and they helped me to create my own degree, a BA in musical theater pedagogy, which was very cool.
And it seems like by the time you went back, you knew I'm going back because I want to teach. That's what, for you. Finishing the degree was about. I'm obviously you've studied pedagogy. You're thinking I do want to pursue teaching.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then right after I graduated, I moved to Athens, Greece.
Mm.
And I was in Athens, Greece for 7 years. I was the head of drama at a British international school there, working with high school and middle school students. And then after that finished, I ended up at Virginia Commonwealth University to get my MFA. And then booked this gig at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I was hired to create this BFA musical theater
Mm-hmm.
program. And what a dream! And 11 years later, I am
Mm-hmm.
here. I am remarried. I have a 17-year-old stepson and a 4-year-old little girl. And so Birmingham is now my happy home. I really love it here. So
I love it.
yeah.
That's what a great introduction to you, and that parlays into let's talk about the 11 years of UAB, and in terms of the program you've created and sort of what it has become. I just would love to hear about what do you think makes a UAB student a UAB student? So what distinguishes them from other BFA students, but also just kind of who are they? What is the culture of Alabama Birmingham?
Yeah, sure. So we are located on UAB is an urban campus. We make up 100 city blocks of downtown Birmingham. And so we tend to attract students that like to be kind of in the center of things. What we are known for UAB internationally is our medical school. So
Mm-hmm.
as far as like the college campus and sort of culture on campus, we have some really smart students from all over the world that are here to be serious about their studies. It's interesting because we are in the state of Alabama, and that is a big football state.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have a football team, but we are not the University of Alabama. We are not Auburn, so
Uh-huh.
we do have a slightly different sort of culture on campus than some of those other sort of big. We're not Big Ten. That's Ohio, the Southeast Conference
This is a musical
schools like
theater
SEC.
podcast. You could say
Okay,
SEC, and
great.
they would go, "Oh yeah, of course you're SEC." Whatever. We'll never know.
Right.
Three
And
people listen
and
to
I
like
don't know
sports on
either
this
because
podcast.
our school is like not that. So that's sort of the
Hmm.
college-wide, university-wide feel. The department itself is small. We have 48 musical theater majors right now.
Hmm.
And then the whole
And
theater
48 is
department.
across the 4 years.
That's across the
Yeah.
4 years,
Hmm.
yes. In the entire program, 48 musical theater majors, and then we've got about 110 theater and musical theater majors in the department.
Hmm.
And we, said this word to a colleague the other day. Like, and I'm not sure it's a great like recruiting word, but like I feel like we're scrappy.
Mm,
We
mm,
tend to attract students that are uniquely themselves, whatever that may be. And so, I mean, wildly talented, right? But um, interesting and a little
yep.
different, and uh, in wanting to be in a place that is going to support and lift them up. And what I love about that then is that, and I feel this way with my colleagues and with my chair, is that we can take really big risks and we can challenge ourselves to
Hmm.
go further than we ever thought we could because we know we've got each other's backs. So you kind of you use that word like family. Oh, it's a big family, but we're not here patting each other on the back always.
Yep.
We're here to challenge ourselves to go further. So
I, I love that
yeah,
word scrappy, and I think it's a good word for people who are going to be in this industry, because boy, is that a important quality to have if you're going to be successful in this industry. You got to have some grit and some scrappiness and some toughness and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Um, so I love that. And now talk to me a little bit about the curriculum at UAB in terms of of the 4 years, of those 48 students. What does freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year look like in terms of the sort of musical theater pedagogy that much of which sounds like you created?
of course. So, it is a dense BFA musical theater curriculum. Students are singing, dancing, acting every semester, as you do in a BFA. In fact, one of our students, we have several students that are in our honors college at UAB, and they were meeting with their honors college advisor, and someone said that the musical theater program has more credits in its degree than almost any other
Awesome.
degree program on campus. So it's a dense curriculum. Really, I would say if you're kind of talking in broad terms, the freshman and sophomore year feels foundational and maybe a little technical.
Uh-huh.
Students are taking music theory and aural skills and class piano. Students are taking the beginning acting classes, the voice and movement classes. They're going to be in those first. We do level our students in terms of dance into sort of
Hmm.
a more advanced or more beginner level, but they will be taking ballet or jazz. And then everyone in their freshman year takes a course called Musical Theater Class Voice, and that's the anatomy and physiology of the
Hmm.
voice and how the voice works. And so then in the sophomore year, we start taking those sort of building blocks and beginning putting those pieces together with our intermediate acting classes, with our musical theater performance classes. We have a sequence of musical theater showcase classes, and that starts in the sophomore year as well. Um, we get even more deep and rich, I feel, in that junior year with musical theater history, with our Showcase 2 class, which is all scene study and duets and trios, with our advanced acting sequence, with auditioning in that junior year. And then senior year is like open the sign for your business, right? So
Hmm.
everyone takes a course called the Musical Theater Capstone class that is very much the business course. It's, what is my brand? How do I do my taxes? How do I negotiate a contract?
Hmm.
All of those kinds of questions. It is probably the most difficult class that students take, and also the most useful in terms of the business industry part. We also have a showcase class at senior year where we're building audition material, we're putting things on tape, we're getting websites together, and then we do a New York City showcase that spring of the senior year. We do it a little differently. We don't like rent out a theater and put on a show. We really spend 3 full days in meetings and workshops and master classes and individual sessions with people. So our students are really kind of building this team.
Hmm.
And then we have a smaller sort of curated showcase, and it's been working so well. Every single one of our students had agent interest last year. I mean, it's really
That's awesome.
quite
Yeah.
remarkable how well that's working. But we wanted to kind of rethink that model a little bit as times are changing.
Yep.
So
That's beautiful, and you've jumped a couple questions ahead, which I love in terms of talking about the showcase and the launch of the business. But you also mentioned sophomore, junior year showcase. Are you using that word differently when you say a sophomore showcase class?
Yes. So the sophomore showcase class, it's musical theater showcase. So we have musical theater showcase 1, 2, and 3. The reason we call it a showcase is at the end of the semester we do share work.
Yep.
But the focus of each of those classes is a little different. That sophomore class is kind of early audition technique. We do a
Yep.
lot of Laban viewpoints in that class. The junior sort of version of that class is our scene study. So that's duets, trios, script analysis, things like that. And then the senior one is really like get that audition book
Yep.
together.
But the sophomore and junior one, are you not inviting in industry guests to see
No, no,
Laban
no,
work
no,
or anything like
no.
that? That would be very interesting.
We share our work with our community.
With the
Yeah.
community. Yep, totally makes sense. Do you feel like there's a discipline of the three, either that you feel like you're consciously focusing on, or also a kind of from the industry perspective, is there something that you feel like agents and managers think, hey, a UAB student is going to be really strong musically, or really an amazing actor, really strong dancers? Do you feel like there's one of those three that floats to the top?
Um, our students are learning technical skills in all areas. And so, when our students go up to Dollywood, we are told that our students can sing anything, like, so we're getting that kind of feedback. But what I would say sort of our philosophy is that it all comes down to storytelling. So
Hmm.
all the technique that we're learning in terms of what we can do with our voices, what we can do, with our bodies and how we tell stories through movement is all comes back to the story and
Hmm.
what it is we're sharing. And so that is sort of the thing that underpins everything that we do.
Yep. And then what about the BFA actors and the BFA MTs? How is their interaction? Or if I was a BFA actor and I'm interested in maybe taking some voice lessons or auditioning for musicals, how does that work in terms of the way that those students interact?
Sure. So we actually don't have a BFA acting program. We have a BA theater degree with a concentration in performance.
Hmm.
But that is kind of like our acting program.
Hmm.
Um, we do have a beautiful sort of relationship, and our students do take acting classes together. They take voice and movement classes together. So there is some crossover in terms of the curriculum. Um, but if I have lots of the BA acting students that take my musical theater class voice course. We have lots that take dance classes. They can both, any of our majors can audition for any of the shows. So we will have students that are theater majors that are in the musicals, or certainly musical theater majors as well. We had several that were in Two Gentlemen of Verona this year. So there's lots of opportunities for kind of crossover and interaction for sure.
Hmm. And what about outside of the theater program? So you mentioned sort of the beginning, sort of what the college campus culture is like. But I'd love to hear both kind of from a culture perspective, what I'm getting in terms of the university experience, but also just like academic classes. What other options do I have? What else do I get from a UAB education that's not the musical theater?
Yeah. So we are, what sort of our tagline is that we offer conservatory style training in a liberal arts setting. So students
Hmm.
do take core classes every semester. It amounts really only to about one or two core classes a semester. It's
Yep.
not huge, um, but you do get to interact with other students on campus, which is very cool. Um, there are so many opportunities to get involved in things outside of the theater department. I mentioned we have several students in the honors program, and boy, do they do so much around campus. We have students that are involved in some sororities and fraternities. We have students that do, other volunteer opportunities on campus. So there's a lot to get involved in outside of the theater department. Of course, our theater students are busy
Yep.
and they're in rehearsal a lot. But there are plenty of opportunities for students to do things. And also in our music department, we had several students who were in the opera this last spring. So, there are lots of things to get involved in on campus and also off campus. I don't know if we want to talk about that now.
Please, yeah, go for it.
So there are several theater and arts organizations around Birmingham. The big one really is Red Mountain Theater Company. It's our 2-time Tony Award-winning theater here in Birmingham. They do primarily musicals, although they do a Human Rights New Works Festival every year where they do stage readings of new musicals and plays. But we've had a wonderful relationship with Red Mountain.
Hmm.
But they just opened their $29 million arts facility 3 years ago, just after the pandemic. And so now we have a formal partnership with them, which is so cool. Our spring musical now is a co-pro with Red Mountain. We just did, for the first time ever last spring, we did Sister Act with Red Mountain. We had
Hmm.
19 students in the show. We did a 3-week run on Red Mountain's stage and, performed to audience tens of thousands of people, which was very cool. And then all of the adult roles were, the Dolores came in from New York, and
Yep.
professionals and all of the adult roles. So we're going to be doing that again next year. So that's one formal partnership we have. We also have a wonderful partnership with the Alabama Ballet, which is a professional ballet company here. Several of our students take company class with the Alabama Ballet.
Mm.
The Alabama Symphony Orchestra lives on our campus. Their home is the same facility where we do our performances. So there are so many really cool arts opportunities in Birmingham that our students get involved with outside of what we're doing on campus.
It's so cool, and it's such an interesting thing to think about as you kind of choose where to go to school. Of like, sometimes you think, oh, if I go to one of these huge cities with huge cultural, tons of artists around me, it's exciting. But it's also like there's something cool about being, well, this is where the exciting young artists are in this city that people will go, let's go get them. That we need a 19-year-old actor, we need a 20-year-old actor. That's a very cool. It's kind of I had some of that experience, going to school in Pittsburgh of like, when the shows that we're casting, if they need a 20-year-old, they're going to come to Carnegie Mellon and Point Park and the schools that are here. It's
Right.
kind of neat. I'd love to talk a little bit just more talking in geography. For our East Coasters, our West Coasters, many of whom are sort of thinking about, I don't really know what the experience of going to, some may have very strong political opinions about, I won't go to school at a red state. Like, what are we going to do? The state is red, and I can't deal with that if I'm more blue. But people also just like culturally who are like, I'm not sure I know what that's going to be like for me coming from LA or New York or whatever, or just anywhere on the East West Coast. What do you feel like? You have students I know that come from all over the country. What is the experience for people who are not necessarily native Alabamians?
I think people are surprised. I was surprised, not from here originally. Yes, we are a red state, and we do have to navigate certain political policies and things that are a part of living in this state. But Birmingham itself, we are this kind of little blue dot in the middle of this state,
Sure.
and so we are we're in the Department of Theater at the University of Alabama of Birmingham, which is one of the most sort of progressive institutions in the state,
Hmm.
in this city, which is a beautifully diverse city. And here's what's Birmingham has a history, and even to today we are dealing with that history here in Birmingham, and it was the center of the civil rights movement. Um, but I think what's really interesting, having lived here now for 11 years, is that the city and the state has really had to grapple with that and build an infrastructure to kind of deal with it. So,
Hmm.
our mayor here in Birmingham, Randall Woodfin, is amazing,
Hmm.
and so it's Birmingham is growing and changing and thriving, um, and is really inclusive as far as the city goes. So I think people really are surprised when they
Yep.
when they come down here. Um, it is different than living in New York, or different than living in LA, or on the two sides of our country. But yeah, it's a pleasantly surprising experience.
Well, what does it mean? And I think it's a question we get from parents sometimes. And I had my experience going to school in sort of the Pittsburgh is basically the Midwest slash East, but we're on the edge of the East Coast, and whatever that experience was. But parents will often ask about that of like, what does it mean to navigate? You say sort of navigate some political issues. Like when you're in a blue city and let's say a pretty inclusive place, which is true of a lot of these college campuses that are in more of an urban setting, even if we're in a more red state. I guess what does that look like? What do you mean when you say that we have to navigate that, or that's an experience? Like what comes up for students that is either navigable or not navigable, from that sort of political perspective?
Yeah, I would say, like, if you look at some of the organizations in Birmingham that are doing the good work, we've got the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, that first of all, they have a beautiful museum that is right across the street from 16th Street Baptist Church, and so they are doing programming all the time and working with legislators in the city all the time. They have a wonderful relationship with our mayor, to promote legislation that's going to support all of our citizens here. We also, here's another really cool organization we have on campus. It's called the Magic City, not on campus, in Birmingham, the
Hmm.
Magic City Acceptance Academy. And it's a charter school that in their sort of bylaws or whatever you call that, they are accepting of LGBTQ youth. It's grades, I think 6, or maybe they've opened it up to grades 4 and up, through high school. So we've been working with them, and we have partnerships with the Magic City Acceptance Academy. So that's right here in Birmingham as well. So we have these organizations that are doing some of that work here that we are partnering with. I see a lot of changes happening in terms of transportation and, if we're, to be specific about some of the areas in which we see legislation happening to support all of the parts of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
So I am grateful to see that this city continues to look at that and
Mm-hmm.
continues to challenge its past.
Totally. And then we mentioned, of course, that you do have students that come from different places. What percentage of your students do you feel like you have a sense of, like, how many come from the general Alabama area, come from across the country? And then I also kind of want to ask, as much as you know, where do they tend to end up? Do most end up in New York, Atlanta, LA, different places? How does that sort of work in terms of where they come from and where they go to?
Of course. So I would say, generally, maybe a third of our students are from the state of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and it depends on the class, but yeah, maybe a third to, yeah, around there, of our students are from the state, or from Birmingham, the city, and
Mm-hmm.
then the rest are from around the country. And we've got a couple students from California. We have several from Ohio. We get a
Mm-hmm.
ton from Georgia, Florida, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana. Like, we tend to attract those students that are sort of in this region.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have students that have come down from Wisconsin and that have come from Arizona. So we are starting to attract international students. A student from Turkey is going to be joining us this year. So it's looking, we are kind of, our student body is from all over.
Yep.
Where do they end up? We have got a big sort of cohort in New York.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a big group actually in Atlanta, which is
Mm-hmm.
only 2 hours from us.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many opportunities in Atlanta, and our students that are
Mm-hmm.
in Atlanta are killing it. Like, we had one who worked on the is working on Marvel movies. We've got one who just shot a commercial for Enterprise. We've got one who just did Fiddler on the Roof at City Springs Theater. So they're like, that Atlanta contingency is really in the thick
Yep.
of it right now, which is great. We have some students in Denver. So we have a small handful in Southern Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like our biggest chunk of students are either New York or Atlanta, are sort of our two big hubs.
Boy, is Atlanta happening in terms of the film world. My wife has blessedly booked 2 recurring TV roles in the past couple of years, both of which shot in Atlanta. I mean, it's just like everything shoots in Atlanta. Like, you can
Yeah.
book it from wherever, but boy, that's where a lot of stuff shoots. Let's talk about cost. So our crack research team says out-of-state tuition is about $48,000 and in-state is about $26,000. Does that line up with your understanding as well?
That's probably pretty close, and that includes room and board.
Right. You're
So
talking
that
about
is
total
not
cost.
just tuition. What I would say is, for our out-of-state students, there are several ways to save money. First of all, we have a really amazing sort of merit scholarship. Like, if you have a 3.0 GPA, you're pretty much guaranteed to get some kind of financial
Yep.
support, scholarship-wise, with merit scholarship. We also have departmental scholarships that can be stacked on top of that. The other thing
Departmental meaning talent based on the audition?
yes, based on the
Mhm.
audition. Mm-hmm. The other thing that is not in print, but I always tell students, any class that an out-of-state student takes online, which could be so many of those kind of core general curriculum classes, you pay in-state tuition dollars on
Mhm.
those. So we encourage our out-of-state students to take those online classes, pay half price, save some money. So there are some other incentives and ways to lower that bill.
And obviously, you may not have exact numbers in front of you, but do you have a sense of, like, What do most of your musical theater students end up paying from a sticker price perspective? Assuming I'm an out of state student, am I paying something like half? Am I paying something like 2/3? Am I paying a third? Do you have a sense of like in general it amortizes? Let's maybe for a second take out someone who's very need based. Of course, I know people with need based potentially get help in that direction. But if I'm not a super need based student, what would I maybe expect to pay of that 48?
Yeah, it's kind of hard actually to look at that big sticker price because after freshman year, some of our students move off campus and save money in terms of
Sure.
housing and
Yeah.
and that kind of thing too. I would say in terms of what they can get from the university, I most of our students are on $5,000 to $15,000 merit scholarships. The department scholarships go from $1,000 a year to about $3,000 or $4,000 a year.
Hmm.
It's not a ton of money, but that can be stacked on top of that. And then if they are taking online classes, they may save some money there too. And then one other opportunity, well, two other opportunities for our students to sort of help financially. We have touring productions that go out. Students that are cast in those tours, they get $1,000 scholarship, and then for up to 10 shows. And then on Fridays, they get booked in schools or assisted living facilities or community centers. So that's another way to get some
Hmm.
scholarship opportunity. We also pay stipend dollars for our students to work in any of the shops. So if a student wants to work on campus and have their schedule work around their class schedule and rehearsal schedule, they can work in our scenic shop or our prop shop or costumes or work at the front desk. And that's another opportunity for them to make some money in the department.
I love it. That's really helpful specifics there. And I've almost basically stopped asking this question because people are so reticent to give me any answers. But is there any in-state, out-of-state chicanery that you know about that your students have pulled off of? Come sophomore year, I've now applied to be a resident of blah 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 and become an in-state, or is that something that is I'm seeing by your face? There's nothing to say about it. So
My
if you
sad
want to share
face.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is really difficult to declare to change your residency to being an in-state student once if you are attending UAB. It
Hmm.
has happened for students whose families,
Or if
like
you have a
we've
relative,
had a couple
yeah.
students whose families have relocated here and they've been
Hmm.
able to fight for that. We do have what's called the Academic Common Market Agreement with Louisiana and Mississippi. Louisiana and Mississippi, as far as I know, don't have a state school that offers a BFA musical theater program. And
Uh-huh.
so we have an agreement with students from those two states where they can pay in-state tuition at UAB. So which is one of the reasons why we get a lot of students from Louisiana and
Makes
Mississippi
a lot
because
of
they're
sense.
paying in-state.
No, we just got
Yeah.
to open that up to all 50 states and we're all set.
I
Good luck. Let's talk a little bit, as we talk in June, normally we're months out of decision day, but now we're really this year only a couple weeks away from it. It feels like in the recurring, continuing decision day that was 2024. But as you're having those conversations with students and you've accepted your students and you've got maybe your wait list and you're trying to figure out who's actually going to go here and who's not going to go here. What do you feel like is the kind of final determining factor? Why do most students say, you know what, I'm signing on the dotted line. UAB is my school. And why do you find students sometimes go, I'm going to go in a different direction. You were my second choice, but I chose it because of what? Like, what do you feel like are those big factors that make people say yes or say no?
Yeah. When students come to campus and when they visit and they meet our students and they meet our faculty and they see our facilities and they see how beautiful the campus is, that's, we have, and they see our shows, like they'll see a show and we've had students like come up to me at intermission of a show and say, I'm coming here, So I think it's stepping foot in the environment and really getting the sense of that culture. I think that's when we find that students say yes. When a student chooses to go elsewhere, it can be for any number of reasons. I think sometimes it is location. Students will end up staying in the Midwest or heading to the East Coast. I think those are location is probably the
Hmm.
biggest reason people choose to go elsewhere.
Totally makes sense. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And on the back end of this break, we're going to talk a little bit about the audition and admission process for UAB. So back in a flash. All right, we are back with Valerie Accetta, and we're going to talk a little bit about the audition process for UAB. I want to start off with you both. I want to talk about pre-screens and then live auditions, but I just want to start out in general. As you're trying to accept 12 to 14 students out of a lot of students, what are you sniffing for in a UAB student? What makes you go, this is what I think is going to turn it into a yes. This is what I'm kind of looking for, for me to say yes artistically.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to that word scrappy, but when we get a real sense of someone, and their heart and their spirit, that's when our ears kind of go up, and so, for us, I mean, we get to see people's work in those pre-screens and at the live audition, but really it's the interaction that we have with them in the room,
Uh-huh.
and when we get to chat with them, and when we get to kind of get to know them a little bit, those are the moments that are the most meaningful, I think, for us when it comes to those decisions.
In more of the sort of post performance interview section of the audition is where you're going. I'm really getting a sense of that heart. It's not something you're saying I need to see it in the monologue or right when you walk in the room. It's could be that, but you're saying most often it's when we say, "Hey, tell me about yourself. Where are you from?" Or what? Then you're going.
Well,
You're
and
getting.
sometimes it is as someone walks into the room. It could be, and we see students audition on campus. We go to Chicago Unifieds. I'm sure we'll talk about all of that as well.
Mm-hmm,
We go to St. Louis. We see students in a lot of different sort of venues, and those Chicago Unifieds are crazy.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes it's just a matter of opening that door and seeing a giant smiling face, or
mm-hmm.
seeing seeing them interact with their mom, or like something that can just clue us into
Yep.
who they are. It may be that moment before they even come in and do any of their work on
Yep.
campus. It could be as we watch them interact with our students as they're
Yep.
signing in and things like that. We like, you get a sense of someone just having a huge heart, or someone offering to share an apple with a fellow auditionee, or things like that. Like, those things can't be sort of qualified
Yeah.
sometimes.
Note for auditioning students: bring apples to your audition. Smart. Smart.
We
Uh,
provide snacks on
oh yeah,
campus, so
yeah.
don't worry.
Uh, I want to talk about the different platforms in person too, but let's start with the pre-screen in terms of just talk me through how you use the pre-screen as a process. So both if you have a sense of numerically, hey, this many pre-screens I'm going to watch and this many are going to quote unquote pass, right? And then also kind of if you're viewing those at all differently in terms of the way you're looking for a certain talent level, or are you looking at those differently than you do the live audition, I guess, when you talk about the pre-screen videos?
So, we really try to see as many students as we can. Um, because we know that in-person interaction is so important.
Mm-hmm.
We really do try and see as many students as we can. Now, there are some auditions like Chicago Unified, it's finite, and we don't,
Mm-hmm.
we only have so many slots. And so we do have to be a little bit more, I hate to say choosy, and the longer we exist, right? We just graduated our 7th class. The more auditionees
Mm-hmm.
we were up 50% in terms of auditions last year. So
Wow.
we know that we're going to have to be even more choosy in some of those
50% year
pre-screens.
over year, meaning 50% more in 2023 than 2022?
Yeah, 2023-24, we saw 50% more students
Wow,
than
that's
we
a big
have in the
jump.
past. It's a huge jump, huge jump. And of course, like, numbers, we didn't crash during COVID.
Right.
We kind of leveled out,
Yeah.
because we had been almost doubling our audition numbers up until COVID, and then we sort of
Uh-huh.
leveled out. And this year, here we go again,
Yep.
which is great. But also, we value that in-person interaction so much, so we do try and see as many students as we can. Um, what I would say is, like, when we're in Chicago, we don't do a live dance call, and we
Mhm.
do use that pre-screen dance video to assess dance skill.
Mhm.
If a student is a really solid dancer, the ballet portion is optional for us, but
Mhm.
include that, because that helps us in terms of
Yep.
um, you know uh, leveling,
Yep.
and things like that. So there are a couple auditions that we do go to where we do a virtual audition. We don't do a
Yep.
live audition a live dance audition at our virtual call.
Yep.
So there are a couple auditions where we're not doing the dance call, and so those pre-screen dance videos actually are extremely important if you're not auditioning on campus.
Yep.
But yeah, you know. I know it's optional, but my favorite video, honestly, is the wild card.
Mhm.
It's so crazy. And some people just want to share a video of them singing in a different style or something. That's fine. But I love when a student really can share something unique about them
Well,
on
you
those wild
talk about
cards.
another opportunity to show some of that heart, some of going, what is this?
Yes.
Who's this special human being? Who are they? It's yeah, so valuable. So that's a great whatever that introduction 10 years ago, whatever that came into the world. Boy, that it was our students love it, and I think so many schools love it. It's really we say it's optional, but it's not really optional. What are you doing? Get it? Why would you not do it? Do it! Come on! Why would you not do a wild card? Um, let's talk about those different platforms. So you mentioned Chicago Unifieds. What are all the different ways to kind of audition for you throughout the year? Virtually, you mentioned on campus, and then what are the different places I might be able to see you?
Yeah, right now we have 2 on-campus audition dates. We've got one in November, we've got one in February. If a student can make it here for that, we encourage them to. It's a chance to get to hang out with our other
Yeah,
students, to really get a sense of what we do here. We do a really fun dance call on campus as well. So there's a lot there that I would recommend. Um, we all of us did virtual auditions during COVID, and it is providing access. It's how we're able to see some of our international students too that can't travel. So we are still doing a virtual audition every year. We go to Chicago Unifieds. We don't do the entire Unifieds circuit, and are keeping our sights on Chicago. And I'll tell you, we see a lot of students from the East Coast and from Florida and such in Chicago as well.
sure. Yeah.
It's a good audition for us. And then we also do the CAP auditions, which used to be in Atlanta, now are in St. Louis. So
hmm
we continue to do those as well.
I love it. As you're, making that yes, I love just to hear, you talk about scrappiness, talk about their big heart. It seems like that's come up more than the idea of like how talented or how good of a singer, how good of an actor, right? How do you sort of weigh those factors in for yourself? How do you think about like, as I'm putting together a class of 12 to 14 people, obviously some level of talent is being evaluated at some point, but how are those interactions working as you're making those tiebreakers or as you're thinking about putting the class together?
Yeah. Again, like it comes down to the individual, right? Like we have students that can sing anything and that can, dance in multiple styles and that are solid storytellers, right? We've got those sort of triple threats, if you want to call it that, or quadruple threats because they play instruments and stuff. But every once in a while, we'll see a student who's like a brilliant commercial dancer and that like does a monologue that is so connected and so rich. And then we can tell that they haven't had any voice training. They're
hmm
on pitch and we hear some tone and we hear some style and some vocal choice, but we can just tell that they haven't had a strong vocal background. And then we meet with them and they are warm and friendly and or really hungry, and we get a sense of their spirit and think like, this is someone we want to be with for 4 years. So then I'll do something with them at the piano to say, hey, can you make this sound? And if
hmm
we hear something there that is the nugget of where we can see growth, then that might be someone that we choose to put in the program, right?
Yep. Totally makes sense. And if you say yes artistically, you mentioned, the academic standards must not be too high from the university if everybody with a 3.0 is getting merit scholarship. But let's talk about what does have to happen if you like them artistically in terms of admissions. Sort of how does that interaction work if you go, I like this person. What do we need in terms of a GPA? Do you look at or care about any parts of the application like do you look at their grades? Do you look at their SAT, ACT? Do you look at essays? How does that work in terms of the way you interact with the Office of Admissions?
Yeah, so UAB actually, while they do offer merit scholarships to students with 3.0, now I say that, but if you have a 19 ACT, then you're not there, and we are still test scores optional since
hmm
COVID, so some of that weighs. But the average GPA of a student at UAB university wide is a 3.7, I think.
hmm
So we do have a pretty high standard in terms of academics. I think you have to have, and again, test scores are optional, and I don't know when. I know now some of the big Ivy League schools are now making test
hmm
scores not optional anymore. So I don't know when UAB is going to get on that boat. I haven't heard anything about that. But when they do, prior to COVID, you needed a 20 ACT in order to get
hmm
into UAB. And so occasionally we would have a student that wasn't admitted academically, and then there's nothing. Now,
hmm
I shouldn't say there's nothing we can do. We can always write an appeal. And if there's a solid reason or something that could go into appeal that might change admissions mind, we have actually had that happen.
Hmm.
So there are some options there, but yeah, the average UAB student has a pretty
Has a
solid
higher
academic
GPA.
record.
But what does that mean in terms of if I am a student with a 3.3, does that mean that I'm going to have a less good chance of being admitted to UAB if you like me artistically? How does that work in terms of the way that it would actually, that interaction would go?
Um, I don't think so. I think, of course, we know that they may get more merit scholarship money,
Right.
and so that may influence the student's decision. But if we are really
Right.
excited about them artistically and personally, and they have a 3.3, that's okay.
Yep. I love it. I just love to talk about what else do you think about as you're filling out a class? Like, are you conscious of questions like, I'm worried about our gender balance, our height balance, size, racial diversity, geographical balance? Are you thinking about differences of ability? Like, how does that factor into the 12 to 14 humans that you're putting together, or maybe the 48 humans if you're thinking across the 4 years? How does that factor into those initial offers? And then also with waitlist movement, obviously knowing you're not going to get 100% of your first offers, how do you think about those questions as you're putting the cast together?
You know, I don't. It's hard to say that it doesn't weigh. I think and so when we talk about like looking for a diverse group of students, we are talking, yes, about race and gender identity and geographic location, and we just end up with a group of really unique students. I think when it comes to sort of those wait list questions, and like I hate this for our waiting list students. I wish I could let them know like April 1st so that they
Hmm.
could make decisions. But if we, and I will say, we, for the last 2 years, have not gone to our wait list.
Hmm.
So if we do go to our wait list, sometimes we do kind of look at like, what is
Who
what
came
is the
in?
makeup
Yeah.
of this class? Who do we
Yep.
have here? And is there someone on this wait list that can add to this diverse group in a way
Yep.
that we aren't isn't being represented here? Then those questions do come up. But I would say in terms of the offers that we make, again, I think we just end up having a unique group of people. It's not like
Yep.
we're looking for a certain gender breakdown or anything like that.
Well,
It's not like we're casting a show.
sure. And when you say, we didn't go to our wait list, does that mean that you offered 14 and yielded 14? Or are you over offering knowing you're not going to yield 100% of that
We
first?
over offer by just a handful of
Yep.
students, but not a ton because we, especially in these last couple of years, like we've been getting our full classes, and because we do have a little wiggle room between 12 and like
Right.
we could have a class of 16. Because we're accredited by the National Association of Schools of Theater. We could have a class of 16.
Hmm.
Um, uh, in our studio classes, we prefer under 12.
Yep.
So, or under 14, 12 to
Right.
14.
Yep.
So that's our golden number. We will offer a couple more than that, and then see where the chips fall.
I love that. That's very impressive, that percentage that you're yielding if you're offering 16 or whatever and getting in 14. The We mentioned the online audition. How are you offering them? And guess, how do you compare the online audition experience to, of course, you mentioned you love when they can come on campus, but as you look at online, compare it to Unifieds, compare it to a regional audition, compare it to on campus, how do you sort of evaluate those auditions?
Yeah, we know. You and I are talking through the internet, through the
And it's
world that's
wonderful.
Zoom
And it's
land right
wonderful.
now.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you still can get a sense of someone, maybe in two-dimensional form.
Yeah.
But we do. So when we do our virtual audition, we have uh, sort of meet and greet before we go into our audition rooms. So we have an opportunity to kind of see people interact in a larger setting. We also have students that hang out in that room. So as students are waiting to come into their audition, they have an opportunity to interact. And we do, and our recruitment coordinator is always in that room too. So after we have those auditions, we chat with them about like, oh my gosh, we loved this person from this, whoever this human was. Like, oh, they were so funny. They asked such great questions. And like sometimes we have ways of assessing those things too in the virtual space.
Hmm. I love it. All right, one more short break with Valerie, and then we're going to be back to wrap things up. So back in a flash. Okay, we're back with Valerie Accetta. And we're going to wrap things up. I want to talk a little bit about, 11 years, such an interesting amount of time, especially to have COVID right smack dab in the middle of that. So, sort of, in the history of your growth, you mentioned you were doubling those classes in terms of people auditioning. Then COVID hits, you level out. Now things are starting to build again. So, I'd love to hear a little bit of kind of like what the history of that growth is, and I guess what you're shooting for. What are the ambitions of UAB in terms of what you're hoping to continue to grow into in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. Um, our first class that came in, we had 5 graduate in that first class. And part of that, we had 8 in that first class. And for whatever reason, people chose to do other things or went to other no one went to another program. They went to different degrees.
Hmm.
But that first class, we actually didn't even have the BFA on paper until March of the year they were making decisions.
Hmm.
So I was recruiting students saying, yes, we're going to have this program.
We hope.
And it's
Yeah.
not online yet. There's no proof, but yes. So the fact that we got anyone in that first class
Hmm.
is a miracle. And boy, I have such a wonderful relationship with those 5 students, and they're doing such great work. One is now the education director at Theater Aspen.
Hmm.
One is doing theater and teaching at just got his MA in theater education. So and one's in Atlanta. Like it's an amazing group of students. And so, the fact that we had anyone in that first year was a miracle. And then as we continue to grow, I think we keep, I know our audition numbers continue to blossom, and we are getting more and more students that are interested in us, which is wonderful because we want to see all these students. But I hope I kind of hope we never become one of those schools that sees 4,000
Hmm.
applicants.
Hmm.
I hope we can continue to treat every single student that wants to audition for us not as a number, but as
Hmm.
a person with a name and a history. So I'm kind of hoping that we don't grow beyond our means in terms of the audition
Yep.
process. As far as how I see the program growing, we have a new faculty member joining us this year, a new music director position that's joining us this year. We have a brand new dance studio, which I'm hoping will allow for even more dance offerings on campus. We have this new relationship with Red Mountain Theater that I
Hmm.
can see continuing to flourish and continuing to offer more opportunities. And as we graduate more students, we have a broader alumni network.
Hmm.
And so when our students go up to New York now, like they have a community,
Hmm.
which is so great. When our students go to Atlanta, they have a community. And so, and that's the one thing with those kind of legacy programs that have been around for decades and decades and decades. It's just, they have this alumni network. And
Yep.
now we are beginning to build that. And that's exciting.
Yep, it's so cool. I mean, it's something we talked about a lot especially in the early days of our coaching company. We were so wonderfully mom and pop and individualized, and as you grow, it's like you want success and you want to reach more people, but then you go, I don't want to lose. In your case, the scrappiness might be the word you lose. We always say we don't want to lose our heart. We don't want to lose. Got to keep our personalization. It's like that's a tricky thing as you grow bigger and bigger. Of how do you keep what made you you and what made you sort of unique in terms of what did originally grow the program.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit. You mentioned being a parent, a parent of a 17 and 4-year-old. You said,
Correct.
"My gosh, we love." I'm a parent of an about to be 3-year-old by the time this episode's released. What
Oh.
advice do you have for parents in this process? So, when you've gotten to interact with parents, as you sort of see them supporting their kids and figuring this out and trying to navigate this, what advice do you have of what seems like it works well and what maybe you'd avoid as a parent in this process?
Yeah, well, that's one thing I do think maybe a little bit different about UAB. We include the parents in so much of what we do in terms of the audition process. And I know like a lot of schools are like, parents, you stay in the other room. Especially when on campus, we have a room for the parents and we go and we interact with them because this is a family decision. We want the students are just making decisions as well. The parents are making decisions as well. And so we want them to have a sense of our culture too. When we're in Chicago, we interact with the parents. We sometimes invite them into the room and chat with them
Hmm.
because it we want to see the whole student, and part of that includes who is traveling with them to do these things. And so, I think those kinds of interactions can also help parents with making decisions, right? Like, where do you feel that your child is going to be uplifted in the same way you do in your home, right? So it is, when I hear that the average number of schools that students are auditioning for is 20 something, I mean, it's just so different than when
Mm-hmm.
I was going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know parents are so, it's so stressful. It is so stressful. So, I'm not one to like offer advice, but if I were to offer advice to parents, like, do things to take care of yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means,
Take care of
find a
yourself
good
as the parent, you're
restaurant.
saying. Yeah.
Yes, as
I
the
love that
parent,
advice.
like, take
Yeah.
care of yourself too.
Yeah.
Like that that Palmer House Hilton Hotel
Yes.
in Chicago is a madhouse. Like,
Mm-hmm.
go find a restaurant
Yes.
nearby where you can go sit down and have a cup of coffee and not be in the crazy,
Yep.
like, find ways to support yourself during this process too.
Uh,
Now that
uh,
I'm a parent, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to need
that's what we talk about as
that.
actors, right? Tend to your own use first. Like that's real. Like I would just this past year, it was at a very anxious parent. I was giving the advice. I was like, "You need to go get a massage." She's like, "Okay, I'll book my daughter for a massage." And I was like, "No, for you. You need a massage. Like you got to take care of yourself. Like you got to make some plans in Chicago to do something that's for you and not for your child too." Sometimes some
Go to a
parents.
museum. So we actually do that for us. So we go to Chicago every year, and the two things that we always do for ourselves, because those are long days for us too, and
Mm-hmm.
like, to be in that hotel all day, it's a lot. We always go to a Greek restaurant in Greek Town and get authentic Greek food. That's one thing that we do. And then we always go see a show. We either go to
Mm-hmm.
Steppenwolf or the Goodman. Last year we saw Illinois at
Mm-hmm. Heck
uh,
yes. Just saw that.
Chicago Shakes right before,
Yep.
before it transferred.
Yep.
So like, we always have things that we look forward to
Yep. It's
at that too. That's like our reward for,
It makes you a
so
better
that would
auditioner.
be my
You're going to do
advice.
better behind the table. They're going to do better as supportive parents. That's great advice. We love tend to your own use. We love it. All right. If people want more information on you or on UAB, where would you send them? Do you want websites? Do we like social media? We have an at Musical Theater UAB tag here. Is that the right place
Yes.
for them?
That is run by our students. So
Mm-hmm.
go there. Like, if you really want to get a sense of who we are, I would say go to our Instagram. There. The other one that is really fun. Our students have a student-run sort of organization called Ice Cream Social. So it's an Ice Cream Social UAB, and it's a student-run dance thing that they do on Fridays of student choreography, and so you can see all of their combinations there. And then you'll get a real sense of like our students and
Mm-hmm.
what they're interested in. If you're interested more in, like, finances, the website's the place to go. And
Yep.
people can always email me. I will respond within 48 hours. So it's
And that's a
V
promise.
Accetta,
That's a promise. 48 hours.
ACCETTA. 48 hours.
Say it again. It's
Unless
okay.
I'm traveling. If I'm traveling, I usually put an away message. But it's V Accetta, ACCETTA at uab.edu.
I love it. Valerie, this was such a pleasure. Thanks so much for the time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.